The technology and the processes that were used to build some of the big early complex military programs was under such pressure from the Soviet Union that there was a hurry-up program to field some of the largest and most complex systems to defend the country, ever produced, and that primarily was the ICBM, and it was produced by what was then called the Army Air Force, who literally had no technical experience whatsoever. They relied strictly on their contractors, and the depth of knowledge was held by their contractors, not by the officers within the Army Air Force. In the 1950s, with the rush to produce our defense systems against the Soviet Union in the Cold War, is where what we have today. The Army is a separate standing military, the Air Force is a separate standing military, the Navy is a separate. And so that grew out of a necessity out of the Cold War. Well, in this rush to field these gigantic systems, there were, the US government began requiring new and different things on the contractors, because what was happening was these great big ICBMs that were being developed were failing at catastrophic rates. If they could get 2 or 3 to work out of 10, the military felt that they were lucky. And each time they ran into a problem during the development of one of these systems, and one of these ICBMs failed during the development process, they'd often buy 50 more or 100 more, because they had to have, they couldn't figure out why the products were failing, why these ICBMs were failing prematurely. And so to counter that, they decided to buy sheer quantities of them. And in the event they would ever have to be used, if they had a particular target that they wanted to hit, they might launch 10 or 20 or 30 of them at the target, hoping that at least 1 or 2 would work. Okay? And that was how the military countered that. And as a result of this decision by the US government on the ICBMs, all that same decision making and that same process later got adopted by the space program. And I don't know how often you guys hear about what happens in the space program, but in the space program, they typically lose about 25% of everything that's launched into space. It fails prematurely within the first year of use. And some of these things are designed to function for 10, 15, 20 years. And so quite often they'll fail within minutes of arriving in space, hours, days, weeks, or months. Well, over the decades, other industries have been, has fostered, and producing very complex systems, and they adopted the same process that was used by the aerospace and defense industry. That included things like parts screening, where you make sure that you get, some of the highest quality parts possible, quality control programs, I'm sure you're all familiar with those. Factory testing, making sure that the equipment operates before it leaves the factory. A lot of military standards that were developed so that they could be cited in procurement contracts for the suppliers of these systems to use. Well, again, that same process was adopted by almost all the other industries that today make some of our most complex products. And just like the aerospace and defense industries, they suffer from a very high rate of premature failures in their products. And I'll cover some of the industries a little bit on what those failure rates are. To counter, one of the decisions that was made by the US government, hoping to increase the reliability of these great big complex military defense systems, was the use of probability analysis. And today, it's quite often we talk about probabilities as if we know what, it's a very common term that's thrown about, and in most industries, probability analysis is used to quantify many, many things. Well, in the production of manufacturing of equipment, probability analysis is used to determine how likely something's going to function, how likely something is function. And as you know, as customers, we're not really interested in how likely something's going to function. We just want it to function. And so for many decades, probability analysis has been the central tool that's been used by companies to help them understand their yields, how much of their product that they manufactured was actually going to function properly with their customers and what was going to be the premature failure rates. And so civilian companies like National Semiconductor, Intel, some of the private companies who may do military and defense business, but primarily sell to consumer electronics, they didn't like the fact that they were producing so much product that failed prematurely, and decided to do the research that should have been done 50 or 60 years ago to figure out why equipment was failing prematurely. What happened back in the heyday of the Cold War at the beginning, in order to get companies to bid on these large, complex military systems, what they included in the contract was a financial penalty in the event that there was a late delivery. But there was no financial penalty if the system failed prematurely. That allowed companies who didn't know, really had never done this kind of thing before, to put in a bid for a job, and if the system didn't work, they'd still get paid. And so that allowed the US government to have many companies bid on all of this, all these contracts, and then decide which ones they wanted to use. That is still in place today in most of the procurement contracts that's used by the military. There'll be a financial penalty for a late delivery, but there won't be a financial penalty in the event that the equipment fails prematurely. And so what I'm going to be talking about is the technology that was developed to replace probability analysis. What we were able to do is now we can measure invasively how long equipment's going to last, identify the products or the equipment, either electrical or mechanical, that's going to fail prematurely at the factory. And then the folks at the factory can decide to ship it to the customer or trash it or try to repair it. But at least it gives them the knowledge of which products are going to fail prematurely and which ones are not. And that helps a lot of companies that build products that are either too expensive, or too important to fail prematurely. And so with that background, I'll move on into the slide. So let's go ahead and have the first one. Who's failure analysis? We're a privately owned company, very small, and what we do is we specialize in something we call predictive science, prognostics, and health. What this allows us to do is begin embedding intelligence, decision-making capabilities into hardware and software, so that in the event that people make the wrong decisions, the equipment will let them know that in the event that they do the action that's been requested of them, these are the consequences that are going to happen. This has been done in the aircraft industry now for about the last 10 years, where the pilot has been replaced by computer software. We don't agree with that particular arrangement. We believe that the pilot should be flying the airplane and the software should be backing up the pilot. But the industry itself decided that wasn't the way they wanted to go. Instead, they let the computer software both take off and land the aircraft, as well as fly the aircraft, as long as there's two pilots in the cockpit. The industry believed that was satisfactory. And we know over the years that once the pilots are allowed their freedom, are no longer needed in which to fly the aircraft, it's very difficult for them to respond in a timely fashion in the event that the computer hands the plane back over to the pilots. Quite often what's resulted has been catastrophic failure. And so this technology that I'm talking about was developed to prevent. It's a proactive approach to preventing catastrophic failures or catastrophic events that often causes a loss of life or the tremendous loss of financial resources. And so we've got about 35 years of experience working in this field. We develop and license what's called proprietary model-based and data-driven predictive algorithms for either embedding in the equipment so that the equipment has intelligent decision-making capability, or for doing this process manually by personnel who then process the data in a very special way to be able to predict what equipment, what products are going to fail, and when. How much remaining usable life is left. And so that's the new paradigm that's coming about within most of the industries that are manufacturing equipment and products. And I'll show you some of the largest examples of where it's been employed at. I mentioned that different industries that adopted pretty much the same process used by the defense and aerospace industry in their manufacturing processes also suffer from premature product failures. And this is a table that is meant to indicate, give examples of those. On the left are the different industries: food, cameras, office equipment, video recorders, up and down. And the first column is the infant mortality failure rates that occur, not every year, but the numbers bounce around, but fundamentally these are the kind of rates that can be expected for different products. Office equipment has a premature failure rate of 6%, whereas in consumer electronics, which we all buy on a regular basis, this particular year where this data came from, it was as high as 20%. Now, in the case of aerospace and defense, particularly within the space industry, as I mentioned, about a 25% premature failure rate. That's about 1 out of 4 systems that gets launched into space fails within the first year. And that can be the rocket that fails, or it can be the payload that fails. And remember that the military space missions, as well as the NASA space missions, are paid for pretty much by you and I, the taxpayer. And they're not insured. So when those things fail, it's out of our tax money. Now, the commercial space industry, completely separate from NASA and military, they developed an insurance, space launch insurance industry. And these companies that insure these launches, what they do is they know that a large number of them is going to fail. And so what they do is they insure a group of launches from 7 to 10. Maybe 7 to 15, whatever number of launches their guys decide they can afford and make sense. So in the event that they insure 10 programs and say 4 of them fail, that means they've still earned the premiums for 6 successful launches. And the premiums for commercial space launches range anywhere between $15 million and say $60 million per premium for the program. And it's really high stakes gambling for the commercial space insurance program because of the high rate of premature failures within these systems. And so the only thing that fails more often than rockets and satellites happens to be aircraft. Now, aircraft's not so bad because if you've got a problem, you get to land, and quite often you have redundancy and sometimes triple redundancy, and you're able to land and in safety. And so it's not as significant. In fact, there's seldom the financial losses with aircraft systems that there are within the space industry, because in the space industry you only get one chance to do it right. And if it goes wrong, it's a loss. You can't recover from it. And so that's the problem that the space industry has. What was developed to counter the use of probability analysis is something called a prognostic and health management program. It provides all the tools that's used to invasively measure the remaining usable life of equipment. And so as a result of using probability analysis and not forcing the companies to find out why their products and their equipment were failing prematurely, we develop what we call a reactive paradigm, where we do the best that we can with what we know, and we sell it or we launch it, and then we wait and see what happens. If there's a failure, then we respond if there's a problem. We call that a reactive paradigm. I think we all pretty much live in a reactive paradigm. We actually sit and wait for the problems to occur, and then we jump on them, and then we solve them. Now, my company's called Failure Analysis because in big, expensive, complex systems, after a problem occurs, we do a failure analysis in order to figure out what caused the failure and what, if any, changes that need to be made so that it won't reoccur. And as a consequence of working in the failure analysis area for so long, there are patterns that show up. They're called failure models. These failure models were used in order to identify other products of a similar nature that were going to fail prematurely. First came about as a result of doing a lot of failure analysis on the same kind of products. That was really the beginning, where companies were saying, it appears as if we can use these failure models to help us improve our yields. We can help us improve the reliability of our products and our equipment that we're selling to the customers, whether it be the military or consumer electronics. And then further research was done by companies, including myself, and we were able to adopt another process that was used by another industry that hopefully you'll find fascinating, to be able to predict which equipment was going to fail without failure models. And those particular tools that are used to do that are called data-driven predictive algorithms. And the basis of probability analysis is something called the Markov property. When you work in the field of probability analysis, you have to pretend as if the behavior that you're trying to quantify is instantaneous, occurs instantaneously, and is random. And that particular property was identified by a Russian scientist, mathematician, many years ago named Markov. And so, although the failure behavior wasn't instantaneous, it didn't matter because the people who were tasked to do the probability analysis were told to ignore any behavior that occurred prior to the failure. Because after all, when you're working in probability analysis, the behavior, if you have a failure, it's instantaneous and random. And over the decades, that belief leaked into the technical people to actually believe that also, that equipment failures were instantaneous and random and couldn't be predicted. The worst case that I can think of in which had suffered the most losses occurred in 1986 on the NASA Space Shuttle Challenger. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but there were 7 astronauts that died. And what had happened was the shuttle was launched way below the coldest temperatures that it was designed to function at. NASA had contacted the builder. The builder happened to be the company that I worked for. At the time it was called Rockwell International. Now it's called Boeing. They were procured. But the builders of the solid rocket motors was a company called Thiokol out of Utah. And the NASA management contacted the management of Thiokol and said, hey, is it okay if we launch? And the Thiokol technical folks said, absolutely not. It says, we've got data that says that on our last launch, which the temperatures was even warmer than it is now, we found the O-rings that kind of sealed the solid rocket motors and kept them safe had leaked. And we were very fortunate that there was 2 of them because 2 of the O-rings for redundancy, and there wasn't a failure, but we were very fortunate. Well, on the Challenger launch in 1986, the technical manager of the solid rocket motors was asked, should we do this? And he said, absolutely not. He says, if we launch in this cold temperatures, I predict it's going to fail. And his management said, well, you can't predict failures. It's not possible to predict failures. Okay? And so that was the indication that the belief that equipment failures were instantaneous and random had leaked into both the technical as well as the management personnel in these big complex systems. So the management of the company called Thiokol told NASA to go ahead and launch in the extra cold weather, and the technical manager who was on the telephone conversation with the NASA management team, his belief, his prediction that the Space Shuttle Challenger was going to fail was ignored. They launched. The O-rings leaked, and there was a catastrophic failure. Now, 60 Minutes did an expose on this back in 2006. It took, let's see, was it 20 years? 20 years for the information. In 1986, they did a failure analysis and concluded that the root cause of the analysis was the management decisions by Thiokol made based on business pressures from NASA. At the time, Thiokol was bidding on some more business from NASA, same folks at NASA, and they feared that if they told NASA that they couldn't launch on that day, that NASA may not award them some future contracts. So the analysis that was done concluded that Thiokol's management had decided to launch the shuttle because of business pressures. The fact that the technical manager had predicted the failure was going to occur was left out of the analysis because everybody believed that was phooey. You know, it was impossible to predict equipment failures. And so that's the worst catastrophic failure that I can think of that demonstrates the belief that equipment and product failures are instantaneous and random. And so to counter, like I said, the use of probability analysis, they came up with something called a proactive environment that uses called this Prognostic and Health Management Program. And this is meant to show how we take our standard engineering and diagnostic analysis and make it part of our proactive diagnostic process or predictive diagnostics. Now, in a diagnostics paradigm, we react after a problem occurs. It's a reactive paradigm. In a prognostics environment, we're proactive. We're trying to identify the equipment that's going to have a problem and then eliminate it so that we don't have a problem, okay? And then we want to, for the equipment that we identify that's going to fail prematurely, we then try to measure how long it's going to last, how long it's going to function. And that analysis is called a prognostic analysis, where we're able to determine the remaining usable life. And so all of that is now within what we call a prognostics and health management program. It's very data intensive, it requires a tremendous amount of data. And that's okay for the aerospace and defense systems because they've already provide lots of information on their equipment and on their systems. Now, independent of this, a new process has been added called the Integrated Vehicle IVHM Health monitoring systems for those products that don't use to create the data that's necessary in order to employ the prognostics and health management program. So today, using this PHM or prognostic and health management or a proactive program, we can now measure equipment usable life. Now, I mentioned that the belief that problems with equipment or failures with either mechanical or electrical systems, that they were instantaneous and random. Within the industries, the people who supply them parts, piece parts, electronic parts of any kind, promise that some of their parts, some of their equipment's going to fail prematurely. They promise the companies, we cannot produce parts that will not fail. We don't know which ones they are. They're in all of the thousands that we make. And so the way that the information is transferred technically to the different companies that use these parts is what's called distribution curves. And it's very complex, but the companies that make parts that's used particularly in the aerospace and defense industry, and for those industries that use that produce high reliability equipment for use, for instance, in the telecommunications industry, the old public telephone switching network, PTSN, which has sort of been replaced by the internet, they use high reliability equipment. And so this kind of data that says how many of our past parts that we produced, how many of them failed and how many of them worked, that data has to be published and available to all the companies that use it. And this is how that information is disseminated. And then this information is then put into the probability analysis to come up with some number, 80% likelihood of success or 90% likelihood of success. They're quantified in that way. And so, as I mentioned, here you're building these very large and complex systems. You've got your suppliers telling these companies, whatever we send you, some of it's going to fail. Some of it, and yet the companies that are using this equipment never developed a process to identify which parts were going to fail prematurely. They made no attempt at measuring the usable life, how long the equipment was going to last. And so now what we can do is we can now measure and confirm the equipment usable life using what we call is a prognostic analysis. And prognostic is no different than what you would hear from your doctor called a prognosis. And so it's used very similar in the same fashions. As I mentioned, no companies in the world that manufacture parts that are used in equipment and products sell parts that won't fail prematurely. In a complex system, this is what's called a Weibull distribution that's used for the people who work in probability analysis to understand what are the failure rates of the components within a complex system. And this chart just simply says that if this is the life this is like over a 10-year time span of a complex system. Where does most of the failures occur at? And it occurs at beginning of life, at the very beginning of life. And then as time goes on, you get fewer and fewer failures. And this is part of what's called the front end of the bathtub curve. If you ever worked in reliability, this is the front end of the bathtub curve where the majority of the failures in time occur at the very beginning. And what this PHM does, it allows us to get rid of these, right here, all these failures at the beginning of life. So you end up with a much more reliable system. Excuse me, your products and your equipment are much more reliable. And so this is the kind of data that the engineers use when they're producing electronic parts and very complex systems, when they want to explain whether or not their systems are reliable. In this reactive paradigm that came about as a result of the Cold War, when you're working with probabilities, a concept came up that said for different standards of parts quality, it takes you an infinite or a very large amount of money to improve the quality of your systems. Very little, okay? And it actually, if you look at these curves that go up these are different parts standards of different grades of parts, you can never achieve 100% reliability when you're working in with probability analysis. 100% probability and 0% probabilities, those are certainties. So in probability analysis, you can't have 0 and you can't have 100%. But what they used this for was to justify why their complex systems why it was okay for their complex systems to continue to fail. They said, in order for us to produce complex systems that won't fail, it costs us an infinite amount of money and we'll never really achieve 100%. And this belief is widely used today, that you cannot build equipment, so long as you're using probabilities to define the reliability of your equipment or your products, you can never achieve what you're desiring, that is producing products that don't fail prematurely. Within the prognostics and health management process, what we are able to identify is the presence of premature aging, sometimes called accelerated aging, and that had never been done before. What the people missed back in the beginning of the Cold War with the ICBMs was they never understood that some of the parts that they used was going to fail prematurely. And that was what they never could figure out was causing the failures of the ICBMs, the rockets, and the satellites, was that when they put a box together, if one of those parts decided to age much faster than everything else, it was going to cause a failure. And they never considered that in their circuit analysis, in their worst case failure modes analysis, and they never considered the interaction of the parts within a system as one of them or two of them aged prematurely. And so if this is an example of test data taken at the factory on a particular product, and this is say it's a voltage level that's what the unit needs to operate. If they saw something like this in the test data, they diagnosed that as noise. And they were motivated to do so, call this noise, because remember, there was no penalty if the equipment failed prematurely. When they had to stop and take a look and try and figure out what the cause of this kind of behavior was, it slowed down their testing schedule, put them at risk of missing the delivery, right? Remember, if you missed the delivery date, there was a financial penalty associated with it, but there is no financial penalty associated with a premature failure. So these suddenly got defined as systemic noise, blamed on the complexity of the test equipment, the software, how unreliable the communication system was on the wiring, a mouse eating the wire or whatever. Okay, so this is what was overlooked during the testing process, that we now tie this kind of behavior to the end of life of the equipment. It's synonymous to that old story of in the old days when the husband went off to work and the wife, borrowed the car and went out and did the shopping, and she'd hear a noise, a thump, and she'd come home and tell her husband, "Honey, I heard this thump in the transmission," and he'd say, "Oh, okay. Well, did anything happen?" No. It's just I just heard this, thump, and I don't know what it was from. And so, 3 months later, the transmission would fail. And it's only now that we associate what are called non-repeatable transient events to the end of life of the equipment in which they occur. Now, in the aircraft industry, whether it be commercial or military, they've got different names for it. They call it, when a pilot hears a thump, or he says, "Hey, I think this happened," and he brings it into the maintenance personnel, they can't repeat it. It's a non-repeatable transient event. And so they call it, they do the best they can, they retest it and everything, and it's called a no failure found, an NFF, or a no failure identified, an NFI. Or a RTOK for retest OK. Then they send the planes back out, 3 or 4 months later, whatever piece of equipment had a problem, it eventually dies, airplane gets brought back in, replaced. And not until now, with this PHM, this proactive approach, do we now associate these non-repeatable transient events with the end of life or a catastrophic failure. Technically speaking, this works only with what's called time series data, behavior that's associated with time. We're not trying to predict the future when we can predict an equipment failure, but it only works with time series behavior. And what we do is we take time series data. This could be volts or temperature, electrical current, RPMs. It can be anything, and that's called time series data. And when we look at that data closely, we call that a diagnostic analysis. Okay? When we analyze the results of your diagnostic analysis, we end up with a prognostic analysis where we do a prognosis. Okay? And then if we identify the presence of premature aging, we then tell you what the remaining usable life is. Now, does this sound familiar? This process sound familiar? It's what the doctors use to treat you. It's exactly the same process that's used in the medical industry to treat patients with disease and illness. What do? They take test data, which is often time series, right? They take heart rates, blood pressure, they'll put you on a treadmill, but they collect a bunch of data about yourself and your body very intensively. They analyze it, they do a diagnostic analysis, and from the results of they analyze the diagnostic data, and they do a prognosis, and they tell you what the outlook is. What's your outlook? There can be no disease whatsoever, and they'll tell you there's no disease. But if you do have a disease or an illness with some short-term repercussions, they'll let you know. So what we are doing is we're mimicking the same process used in the medical industry now to be able to predict with certainty equipment failures. Here's some of the industries in which it's applied. In the medical industry I just mentioned, financial investing, it's taken over the Dow Jones Exchange. It's called robo-investing, where it's all done by predictive algorithms. Predictive algorithms identify which investments to buy and when to sell. And they're doing about, of the companies that admit to using it, they do about 40 million transactions a second, eliminating the need for the stockbroker on the floor. In law enforcement, we're now using what's called predictive policing software. In engineering, as I mentioned, we want to be able to add intelligent decision-making technology into equipment. In medicine, we're able to predict who might be acquiring mental illness as a result. In the aerospace industry, I've been talking all morning. In geology, we've pitched it for predicting earthquakes, volcano eruptions, be able to identify and track tsunamis from space. In Homeland Security, we've asked the Department of Justice to use a victim-based criminal program rather than a criminal-based. Right now, all the analysis that's done primarily it's a criminal-based system, and we want to switch it to a victim-based system so that we can use the data that's characteristically used called profiling, make that called prognostic evidence so that we can use it in solving crimes. And so it reverses, it changes the paradigm by allowing the evidence that's collected from the victims to be scientific evidence. So in general manufacturing, I think I've been talking about this. This process, this PHM technology has been used in the nuclear power industry for the last 30 years. The proactive paradigm for growing the business environment where this proactive environment can help. If you are trying to initiate growth by trying to keep the graduates of the local institutions here, we say no, that a proactive environment probably wouldn't help that very much. But if you're trying to stop existing businesses from closing, we think that it will work. If you're trying to stop businesses from moving out of the county, we think it's applicable. If you want to attract new types of businesses to the county, we believe it's applicable. Attract different businesses from different counties, we believe it will work. And attract existing businesses from other counties, yes. Same process, the same. We did the same thing for residents, trying to keep existing residents from moving out of the county, attracting new residents from other counties, that whole thing. So you break it down to find out where it is that you can benefit from using this technology and where it probably won't work. I did speak with the county. Ellen Moore, I think is her name. And we spoke for a little while, and she wanted to get some of the ideas about what a proactive business climate would be. And so the things I told her was that if you want to change to a proactive business environment, it's got to be done from the top down. It can't be done from the bottom up because there's too much resistance. It's something this is the way it's done in the big companies. The big companies management decides that they're going to go in this direction, and then it's just levied right on down through the management and into the people actually doing the work. And you get a minimal of resistance. So I also suggested that to grow the Santa Cruz County, to identify the largest industries that are the most desirable to attract to Santa Cruz County. These might include companies that are associated with existing companies that are already here in the area, as well as companies that work with the UCSC on their existing contracts, their existing areas of research, and those areas of research that are planned by the UCSC. Taking a proactive approach to try to likely can they get some growth from. I asked her to have the county employees identify the problems that these companies will experience. These are people that do this for a living and have been doing it for many years. They know exactly what kind of problems are going to arise when new businesses, new residents try to come into the area. I suggested that they rewrite their county policies and procedures to work with a proactive environment rather than a reactive environment, and then to relate the employees' performance to their success at attracting new businesses or new residents, rather than just letting them sit back into a reactive environment, waiting for companies that have problems to come and come to the county. Have the county first meet with the new businesses, identify what kind of problems have occurred in the past when when other companies like them have tried to come into the area, and then have the county employees help them solve them, rather than simply wait for the companies to experience the problems with the county and then work them at that time. So anyway, she seemed to respond very positively to those ideas. I also said that for those people working within the county on trying to attract new businesses and new residents, that those are the people that they should be the decision makers. If you've got one group of people that's trying to attract new business, and you've got another group of people that are those that are making the approvals on the inspections or on any changes over regulations, that all the work that they're doing to attract new business isn't going to work, because the people who have to actually approve things, don't go along with the program. So I said, have them be the same people. And she said that she believed that they were in the process of integrating those two groups of people at the time that we spoke. Okay, so, yeah.
I was curious, is there any connection between Pavlov and Markov?
None. No. Markov was a mathematician. Pavlov was a psychologist, and Markov is a mathematician. And he's a fellow that worked up probability analysis to begin with. Probability analysis is like if you flip a coin 10 times, probability analysis says you're going to get five times you're going to get heads, and 5 times you're going to get tails. But if you were actually to flip a coin 10 times, you don't get 5 heads and you don't get 5 tails. You might get, at one time, you might get six tails and 4 heads. And so it's an example that the results you get from probability analysis aren't related to reality. It's a probability analysis, but at the time it was the best tool that we had to quantify things, and so it was accepted. Yeah.
Do you know if this has been applied to weather forecasting?
Not to my knowledge, no. And the only areas that I know that's been applied to, as I mentioned on that one chart, was the nuclear power industry for about the last 30 or 40 years at the nuclear power plants, and the policing industry, and the law enforcement, and as well as the aerospace engineering. The new Boeing aircraft that's been in the news lately that had that battery problem, that entire aircraft was designed, the equipment talks to each other, and then the equipment talks to the ground equipment, and so all of the servicing that needs to be done on any given aircraft is handled by the equipment, not by personnel. The logistical people have been removed, and it's equipment to equipment communications. If there is servicing that's been done, the equipment tells the maintenance guy what equipment to remove or replace. It's all done by the equipment, and then people just simply respond to what the equipment tells them to do. Yeah.
It does seem with the climate change that there's a fertile field for application.
Well, the model of the weather is so complex that it's overpowering for this approach. Although it would be great if we could. What this typically is used for, the ones I mentioned in the manufacturing, hardware and software, including software, we're actually able to predict when a computer software is going to crash. We embed measurements inside software to track and then be able to predict when software is going to crash, as well as hardware. So this is both hardware and software. And so it's a proactive environment where we want to eliminate the problems before they occur, rather than respond to them after they occur. And in your computers that you use at home, pretty soon, the next generation of computers that you start buying, your hard drive or your fan, if it's going to fail, it's going to send a message up to you. It says you've got 2.5 weeks left of life on your fan. Okay, the companies that are producing these parts for the new computer systems are already embedding the technology in the replacement parts when you get your for the new computers. So that's already at the consumer level. Most of the time, this technology is used very expensive, very complex systems. Caterpillar, for instance, is one that uses. Yes?
I was just going to comment that I worked for a dozen years in the semiconductor capital equipment industry.
Yes.
They applied materials, Watkins Johnson. They supplied the equipment to Intel.
Yes.
So what I saw was that it was a given that they were going to have to adjust the equipment out in the field once it was shipped.
Yes.
That was a given.
Yep.
Then I worked on the product launch planning. So the challenge, like you say, is about the ship date.
Yes.
How ready is it? And then you have the customer demanding it, like
Yes.
Intel.
Exactly.
And you had a team of well-trained people
Yes.
to go in the field, and process improvement was just a given.
Yes.
That they're going to go out, They're gonna go to Korea, they're gonna make you be there 6 weeks.
Yes.
Improving the process.
Yes.
So they got good
At doing-
that.
Yes.
They didn't really do formal analysis, they just knew over time.
Over time.
Kind of where the problem areas might be.
Yes.
But the pressure is on. You are
For delivery.
manufacturing.
Yes.
First, if the equipment's not working.
Yes.
And the line is going down to the chips, the pressure is on.
Is
to get
on.
that equipment to work.
Exactly. And if you know when that equipment's going to be failing, like if you can predict what equipment's going to go down and when, you're ready with the parts and everything so that when it does fail, or you can replace the parts beforehand so that you don't go down. Is
So
the
they
rule.
always had several parts suppliers
Mhm.
for every single.
For everything, right.
Yeah, it was
To be ready.
Very complex. What we all started to see was nobody though had their arms around the whole thing.
What was causing
It was
it?
equipment, it was chemicals, processes,
Mhm.
very complex industry to manage.
Absolutely.
Because you found that you're one set of engineers for equipment,
Yep.
another one for the
Completely
process.
separate,
Yeah,
and they don't talk.
so,
What we did with National Semiconductor in Sunnyvale, they build the little electronic systems that were being used to control the wind farm, the windmills for generating electricity. They were building systems on a chip that was integrated into other equipment. Well, they cost about $30,000 for this little set of chips, and then they chip them out. The other company would integrate them into with some other equipment, and then they wouldn't work. And they'd send them back to National Semiconductor saying, hey, you've sent us a faulty system. And we said, no, it was working when we shipped it to you. You did something when you integrated it in with the rest of the equipment. You must have done something. And they said, we don't care. We want a new one. Okay? So what they did was they used our approach. They said they measured the usable life of their little systems on a chip. They knew that it was going to last at least a year by using this PHM approach. They removed the warranty from their systems on a board. So that was how National Semiconductor, they created a whole new high reliability product line of these little systems, so that when they shipped them out to their customer, and the customer said, hey, this arrived broke, National said, hey, we knew it was going to last at least a year. If it broke, it's because you did it. We use this, we were able to measure the usable life, and we knew it was going to last at least a year. And so they created a product line without a warranty. And so that's how they used it to their advantage. And there's different ways of using this kind of a technology in different industries. Yeah.
Could you say a little bit more about this victim profiling?
Oh, sure. What we want to do is, if you look at how in a crime-centered analysis at a crime scene, you look at as much as you can about the criminal. And as a consequence, as you know, the worst case that I can think of, obviously, is 9/11. You had a handful of guys who was able to kill 3,000 people in the building. And so when you go to look at the data in a criminal-centered approach, you've only got a handful of data samples. You've got, said, what was it, 19 guys, right? And they all happen to be Middle Eastern. They all happen to be within the age of 15 to 29 or something. But whatever that criteria, whatever all that criteria that they all shared, because there was only 19 criminals, it's an insufficient data sample to be meaningful scientifically, okay? But when you look at it, the crime from the victim standpoint, we had 3,000 victims, and if you analyzed the cause of death for each one of those victims independently, you now end up with 3,000 data samples, which now becomes statistically significant. And we want to call that evidence from the victims, we want to call that prognostic evidence. And we submitted a proposal to the Department of Homeland Security to be able to use that approach to be able to predict at the airports which people were likely match the criteria that they had gathered from the victims, which people matched that criteria so that they could stop and talk with them and ask them some questions. Today they can't do that because in a criminal-based system, there's not enough data to make it significant, and the legal system has allowed that to be called profiling in a criminal-based system. When you look at it from a victim-based system, it becomes prognostic evidence, scientific evidence with statistically significant sample rates to make it be used to justify simply stopping and asking somebody that looks like a terrorist, hey, you know, ask them some questions about, you know, how long do you plan to be here? You know, did you buy a round trip ticket, whatever it is, you know, why are you coming here? You know, who are you going to see? Right now they can't be done. And so anyway, we did submit a proposal to the Department of Homeland Security to use this victim-based approach. Yeah.
Yeah, to support that, I was just at a workshop yesterday, or a presentation on safety for women. And they did a victim approach analysis of why women are raped or attacked, and they interviewed the criminals. They
Yes.
went to the jails.
Yes.
They interviewed all these rapists, and they said, what are your top 3 criteria of how you pick the person?
Yes.
And they said the women were preoccupied. They were looking at their self, they were walking along, looking at their cell phones, they weren't looking around at their environment. They were shuffling along, okay? So the end analysis was pay attention to your environment.
Yes, to the victim,
Don't-
right?
To the victim,
yes.
to women, pay attention. Don't be walking on a street,
Right.
looking at your cell phone, looking down, shuffling along, looking like an easy target.
Yes.
And so that was like good, and that's that victim.
Victim-based analysis is what they did, right?
And,
But
and it worked.
And it's good. That's good. It's great advice for potential victims. What we want to do is be able to use prognostic evidence in court to prove that the criminal actually caused the crime. Right now, we rely on remember when forensic evidence didn't even exist? Like 20, 25 years ago, forensic evidence didn't even exist. Okay, and it took many court battles. It took a whole lot of effort on the part of many, many people to get forensic evidence, which is, by the way, statistical, accepted as court. For instance, when they do a fingerprint match, they may only match 7 points on a fingerprint. Maybe they do 8, maybe 10. You know, there might be 40,000 places in which you could do a sample, but when they do an actual fingerprint match, they might only use 10 or 12 locations. And that's often enough to get a person convicted of a crime. And yet, it's a very small data set. And so we want to use that same approach with prognostic evidence, where we want to show what the characteristics of the victim, rather than focus on the criminal. Yes.
So based on this, the woman presenting is now going into Santa Cruz County schools, middle schools and high schools, talking to students, boys and girls, about not being a victim and not being a part of the bullying by putting yourself in situations, paying attention, being proactive.
Right.
And so what I'm excited about is by having, just like you're saying, a new approach.
A new approach.
And talking to the young people.
I'm having a proactive approach.
Exactly.
Yes.
And focusing on potential victims, because we're all hearing about bullying in school.
Again, those are the criminals. The bullying themselves, we're focusing on them.
Yeah.
Well, what about the victims? Exactly.
So the thing about, stay away from the bullies, don't be shuffling along, texting, all this texting the kids are doing.
Pay attention, because it can happen to you, kind of thing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
So one of the things you're saying here with regards to the county
Yes.
is you can see patterns in business behaviors that suggest they might move out of the county.
Absolutely. If you're going, but all you got to do is talk to them. You can go and talk to them and find out exactly why they're moving. You can go there and talk to each one of them, and you gather the data from all of this, and then you process it using this prognostic analysis, and from there you can find out what is the, quote, failure model of businesses that want to move out of the county, and then you identify what needs to change within the county so that that failure model, the behavior no longer occurs. And that's what I was trying to get to towards the end there, exactly.
So say for instance, I don't know how many businesses there are in the county, but say, I know there's many, many businesses registered in the city that are like 1 or 2 person operations.
Yes.
But we look at those businesses that have grown up and have got, 5, 6, 10 employees. And there are signs, warning signs.
Warning signs, exactly. There's warning
They'll
signs.
tell you, hey, I'm not happy with the county, and this is why. We need to move here because of this, or this reason.
Exactly.
And then you start saying, well, some of these things we can fix.
Yes.
Some we can't.
Some you can, some you can, some you can, and some you can't.
Right.
Yes. But what you do is it's a data-intensive process where you go out and find out what's going on with these businesses. But like you said, the warning signs, we now call those prognostic markers, prognostic identifiers, premature aging, accelerated. They have different terms for those in different industries.
Right.
But fundamentally, they're the early warning signs
Right.
that indicate what's going to happen in the future.
Well, we all know how electronics is.
Yes.
You get a new radio and, one corner's super hot.
Yes.
Well, that's not good.
That's not good.
Yeah, because we know that heat usually wrecks things.
Exactly.
What you're asking is, can we measure the heat of where these businesses and where these people in our community are?
Yes,
And how does that play out?
Well, what we want to do is talk to the businesses, the people that have made the decision to move out. Why did they decide to move out? Where in their life here in the county? What were the steps that led up to them leaving? Not just talk to one, but talk to as many as we can, so you build up a database of these failures. And then when you see it happening to other companies, you walk in and you say, hey, listen, we've done this analysis and it shows that as these things are occurring to you, in about 9 months you're going to get fed up and you're going to want to leave the valley. Let us go to the county and make these proposals. And what I was told by the county, by Ellen, is that the county is now in a position where they're really motivated to do things differently. For whatever reason. Pardon?
When did this happen?
I had a meeting with the county last week.
I mean, when did they decide to do?
Oh, I don't know. We met at this meeting where the county stood up and said, what can we do? Who's got some ideas about doing things differently so that we can attract more businesses, attract new businesses and people? And so what initiated that meeting, I have no idea. So perhaps you guys do. I don't know.
You've had no reaction yet from Ellen or?
She wrote down. She took 2 pages of notes, and she thanked me very much for my time, and that was it.
So we're waiting to see what happens.
Yeah, my guess is, she was asked to come and talk with me, get my ideas, and take them back to her boss and see if any of them made any sense to do.
I went to a city council meeting here several years ago, and a retiring financial officer was leaving, going probably from Monterey or somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And he had done a 5-year estimate on where the city was going to be. And I thought, this guy's put tons of work into this. People at UCSC helping over the hill.
Yeah.
And he gives this presentation of, you're going to be 10% every year to set aside for surplus. And they're using the surplus.
Yes.
So 5 years out,
It was going to be
it
gone.
would be like $500,000 if I remember the number
Yeah.
at that time.
Mhm.
His estimate. Sure.
Well,
Somebody says, well, what's it going to take to get that kind of money in sales tax, for instance? He talks to the assistants for a few seconds, comes back and says, one Costco. One Costco's already here. But here's a city that's against box stores.
yeah.
So at the end of the thing, after he leaves, and they tell him what a great job you've been doing, what a nice presentation, appreciate your help over here, he leaves, and then whoever was chairman or board of that time, the council, says, well, we have to remember this is only an estimate.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I was surprised about, you're talking about the county.
The county, yeah, came to me. And
Half the change, we did think.
Do you think that was Jack Dillis that you're talking about?
I don't remember his name, but it was one hell of a presentation, so you go back there.
Warren, that's in our group, did a study, I helped him on, to help try and grow business in the cities. Santa Cruz had some development on it. So we put together kind of a project about what industries might work here and how we might be able
to attract them.
attract them.
Mhm.
I think tonight they're actually having a meeting at UCSC about licensing technology. The
Yes, two other.
technology licensing process is kind of broke. And in UCSC, there's a strong town and gown separation as far as business. I mean, they're on the hill and they're not. And UC San Diego has a whole funding organization. They have 9 people working at bringing technology out of UC San Diego to
Mhm.
the community,
Mhm.
doing small research report with startups. UC San Diego is only about 4 or 5 years older than this UC Santa Cruz. But UC Santa Cruz kind of pulled itself towards this direction of, of
Isolation?
more academic, more of a humanities-oriented program. And now when they've actually invested in the engineering side, some of this, a lot of that has been focused over the hill at NASA. A huge presence at Ames.
Yeah, in fact, he apologized for creating jobs at NASA by the university.
The university is pretty much looking over the hill.
Over the hill,
So
yeah.
Silicon Valley's you see,
Yeah.
not Santa Cruz you see.
I
That's
think-
a bit of a challenge for our community.
Yeah, I think that's about it for my time.
We have a couple more minutes.
Oh, okay.
Anybody has any questions?
One other question? Anybody?
I
Yeah.
was curious on what kind of businesses are leaving. I know the big furniture company is going out of business, but
Sure.
I kind of saw that because I see that as part of the economy.
Me too,
not just
absolutely.
Santa Cruz.
Not just Santa Cruz,
In
no.
other words, a lot of people like me, their homes are full of furniture. I
Exactly.
don't need
Nobody's
furniture.
buying
I don't
anymore.
need to keep buying beds, I don't need to keep buying furniture.
Well, there's also
You
fewer
don't-
people are working.
Yeah.
There's more on public assistance. People in today's economy, we don't have the extra jobs available. There's not young people coming out of schools, buying, moving into their own apartments, needing furniture. Whatever the old paradigm was, where people needed to buy furniture, that's gone now.
Also online, one of my companies is a pool and spa business, maintenance,
Wow.
new spas.
Mhm.
A family business since 1971.
Yeah.
What they have now climbed, the internet is
Ah.
affecting businesses.
Even for them,
Big
yeah,
time.
big
and
time.
This isn't being discussed enough.
At all.
People can buy online cheaper than they can buy from a manufacturer and sell it with a teeny markup so they make some money.
Absolutely.
And people come in and they'll use up their staff time, talk to them for 45
Get educated,
minutes,
yes.
leave, go home and buy it
On the
online.
internet,
And that,
exactly.
and they said this is now a huge, huge problem.
It is, absolutely, it is. And yet, it wasn't addressed at all as far as why the business environment in Santa Cruz County is down at the meeting. That was, nobody mentioned that, right? It didn't come up. And so,
Yeah, so that's a local business. So we joined the Think Local First.
Mhm.
They're up to 650 people. So if you're thinking about buying something, buy from.
By local,
Santa
right,
Cruz.
yeah.
Don't necessarily buy over the hill like a lot of people do.
Over the hill or on the internet.
Yeah.
Over the internet. I think every business is being impacted by that sells products thing. So this last chart was our suggestions that we provided to the county of Santa Cruz for creating a proactive growth environment. They include just the awareness that the change to a proactive environment must be from the top down. At the working level, the resistance to change from the current reactive paradigm to a proactive paradigm is just simply too much for most people to handle. The relearning, the difference in decision making, the changes are too much and too easy to resist. And so for a proactive environment to be adopted, it's got to be ordered from the top down. We suggested to identify the target industries that are the most desirable to attract to Santa Cruz County. These might include those that are associated with existing companies and industries and existing contracts in areas of research that's completed or planned to be completed by UCSC. We said to identify the problems that these companies, these industries will experience. Employees of the county knows what those will be. They happen on a regular basis, and eliminate them for these companies and these industries in order to make the transition to Santa Cruz County much easier. We suggested fundamentally to rewrite the county policies for a proactive county-wide policy, and that would be a major change. We also want to point out that most decisions made in a proactive or a preventive paradigm are much different than those in a reactive paradigm where you're simply waiting for problems to occur and then reacting to them. We suggested to have the county employees that are working to attract more businesses and more residents to the county to be the decision makers that will make the policy changes happen so that these businesses and these new residents can be relocated here to Santa Cruz County. Also, to require the county employees to educate their customers, that is, the residents or the new businesses, the contractors, as include that effort as part of the fee that's used to sign up getting new business licenses. And then to reward the county departments that improve efficiency as measured by metrics taken from the customers that they support. To attract and keep new businesses by committing to become a center of business excellence. Currently, the popular vision of Santa Cruz County is one primarily of tourism, and so to change that to becoming a center of business excellence requires extra effort for the county. And to attract and keep the new residents by using advanced technology to improve and eliminate obvious problem areas that residents and new businesses will have as they try to transition into Santa Cruz County. You want to, which is already being done, to employ predictive policing and what we call a victim-based law enforcement program, where instead of focusing on the criminal, you want to focus on the victim. And the victim-based law enforcement allows an expansion of the law enforcement's capabilities to stop people and ask questions without violating their civil rights. Criminal-based law enforcement program, where at a crime scene the focus is on the criminal, allows a paradigm in which people that are suspected of being criminals, if they are approached, if they are simply stopped and asked questions, it's considered violating their civil rights, and so a victim-based law enforcement program is one that does not do that, and that's enabled through using this new technology that we call prognostics and health management and predictive science. And it would be in conjunction with the currently used predictive policing program that's used by the city of Santa Cruz, as well as the city of Los Angeles and possibly the city of Salinas, due to a reduction in the size of the police force. And now they're relying more on predictive policing software that's able to predict where the likely areas of a crime are going to occur and approximately what time of day. We suggest to fund mental health organizations in order to predict, prevent, and cure mental illnesses. And since Santa Cruz offers many services in the mental health community, it tends to be a magnet for those individuals that need help in the mental health community. And by funding new programs that will effectively stop the growth of the mental illness community, that will help alleviate the pressure on many other resources that are used in the county to support the mental health community. We also ask to have the county strive to lower the cost of government by automating logistics using intelligent decision-making self-prognostic systems as they come available, and to rewrite the city's policies to reward those public employees that become more efficient by shrinking their departments and decreasing budgets. And we want to also suggest motivating the academic institutions to becoming responsive to the changing needs in the job market. And I think that's being tackled to a large extent by UCSC. And we need to accept that most graduates of our academic institutions will be working outside the academic environment and design the classes for non-academic applications. Currently, the academic programs are developed assuming that the students will be going on to achieve, acquire, and earn advanced degrees and stay within the academic environment. And 90% or more of the graduating students do not stay in the academic environment, but end up working in industry. We suggested to relate county employees' performance to their success in attracting and keeping new businesses in Santa Cruz County, and have county employees develop the information necessary for the general public to be successful at attracting new businesses and residents. Now that's for the general public. So, okay, thank you very much, guys. Yeah, thank you.